You know, there's this thing that they say that you never forget your first love. Well, that's not true because I've forgotten all of mine, but it is true in the sense that you never forget the first love that you learn about when you were a kid. And that love, at least for me, was Christopher Columbus, famous Italian explorer and alleged discoverer of the Americas. And if you're thinking, wait, why is the name in brackets? Did we just ruin the video by revealing the punchline? Then yes, we have, but stay with me here. You see, when I learned about Christopher Columbus in school, my teacher told me that he had discovered the Americas. And this made sense to me because up until that point, we had been learning about Europe and the people who lived there, namely the Greeks, the Romans, and Jesus. So when I heard that a European man had found another landmass halfway across the ocean, I thought, wow, Europeans are pretty great. And then I felt really bad for all the people who had been living in the Americas for thousands of years before old mate Chris turned up because none of them were European. Therefore, none of them were great. Now, I don't want to spend too much time telling you about the atrocities committed by Europeans after they arrived in the Americas because A, I've already spent a lot of time talking about that in my video about the Mongol Empire, and B, I do not feel like getting canceled again, so I'll just give you the TLDR version. After they got there, the Europeans killed almost everyone by giving them smallpox, raped everyone, enslaved everyone, tortured everyone, and stole all their stuff. The end. But anyway, let's talk about Christopher Columbus himself. Where did he come from? What was his personality like? And how did he become the most famous explorer in history despite having traveled to the least exotic place in history? Born in Genoa, Italy in 1451, Columbus came from a long line of poor, uneducated seamen who had been supporting their families by sailing around the Mediterranean, hauling cargo since the days of the Roman Empire. Just kidding. He actually came from a long line of rich, well-educated spice merchants who had gotten filthy rich by selling spices brought back from India by the returning Crusaders. They also gave him a very unusual first name, which was originally a shortened version of the name Christofle, which means bearer of Christ or follower of Christ. But you can probably call him by his nickname, Chris. From an early age, Columbus showed that he was a curious child with an unquenchable thirst for knowledge and adventure. He would often skip school to go exploring or get into fights with other kids, presumably over who was the true follower of Christ. By the age of 20, he had mastered the art of navigation and had even captained his own ship on several trading voyages through the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. In fact, it was during one of these voyages that Columbus realized that the known world was round, an idea that had not yet caught on in Europe at the time. He was also particularly fascinated with mathematics, astronomy, and cartography. But unfortunately, there isn't any evidence that he was very good at any of them. In 1476, he married a woman named Filipa Moniz Perestrello, who was the daughter of a Portuguese explorer. This gave him the idea to sail around Africa to get to India and start his own spice import business. And so he set off with 2 ships and 40 men, including his brother Bartolomeo, who would later betray him. In a storm, resulting in one ship sinking, the other being blown off course, and Columbus spending several months stranded on an island before getting rescued by the Portuguese and returning home with only 18 men. But at least he had acquired the right of citizenship in Portugal. After this, he sailed around the North African coast, trying to find gold and slaves for the Portuguese. And then he did something that people said could only be done by traveling to India, which means that he must have traveled to India. So then he went to Spain to tell everyone that he'd been to India and see if they wanted anything from there. But while he was there, the Spanish monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella were busy doing the thing where they kicked all the Jews and Muslims out of Spain and started building a massive navy to conquer the known world. And they weren't interested in sending sailors to faraway lands. So in 1492, Columbus went to see them again and pitched the idea that instead of going around Africa, maybe they could just go over Africa. Unfortunately, neither Ferdinand nor Isabella could understand the concept of a flat Earth, so they thought it was crazy and sent him back home. But a few months later, Isabella relented and agreed to fund a voyage under one condition, that if he didn't reach Asia, he wouldn't be allowed to get off his ship. And so with 3 ships and 87 men, he set sail west across the Atlantic, convinced that the Americas were on the other side of the ocean. For 8 weeks, the crew sailed without finding land. They ran out of food and water and became infested with rats. The men rioted and wanted to turn around and head back to Spain, but Columbus refused and kept sailing west until finally, on October 12, 1492, someone on board shouted, "Land!" To celebrate, Columbus shot a cannon to signal the discovery of the New World and claimed the land for Spain. And although he had actually reached an island in the Bahamas, historians still refer to this as the discovery of the Americas because otherwise it would be like saying Leif Erikson discovered America, which would be boring. Upon reaching Spain, Columbus was treated like a hero, given the title Admiral of the Ocean Seas, granted noble status, and received the riches from the New World that he had discovered. Unfortunately, he didn't actually bring back any gold or silver, just a few worthless rocks that he thought were precious gems. And to make matters worse, the natives of the island he had landed on hadn't used the metal since the Inca Empire, which had collapsed 600 years earlier. In 1493, Columbus returned to the Americas with a fleet of 17 ships and 2,000 men to establish settlements, but they all soon starved to death. And in 1498, Columbus took one last voyage to South America, then died believing that he had actually reached India. Now, in the year 2000, there was a movement to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day to honor the native people of the Americas and raise awareness of the genocide that they suffered. And some U.S. states and cities have switched to celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day instead. But many people are still angry about it, because their whole lives they've celebrated the amazing journeys of Christopher Columbus, famous Italian explorer and alleged discoverer of the Americas. I mean, the guy's statue has been outside the U.S. Capitol building since 1889, and there's even one of him in Disneyland. Not that I would know. I haven't been to Disneyland since 1985. No, I wasn't born in the 1970s. My parents just liked to party. But yeah, that's the story of Christopher Columbus, the iconic figure whose voyages led to the enslavement, torture, rape, and murder of millions of innocent people and the appropriation of their land. And if you think that sounds like something that should be taught in schools, then you might want to check out today's sponsor, Wondrium. Wondrium is an educational streaming platform with thousands of documentaries, how-to videos, and interactive lessons on every subject imaginable. If you want to teach your kids about the atrocities committed by Europeans after they arrived in the Americas, they have a whole section called Ancient Worlds, filled with amazing documentaries like Aztec, Maya, and Inca, The Lost Kingdoms of the New World, which explores the magnificent civilizations that existed in the Americas before Columbus arrived. There's also The Real Story of the Vikings, which will teach them about the seafaring people who explored North America nearly 500 years before Columbus. And for the older kids, they can watch Inside the Mind of a Con Artist to learn about how the most notorious scammers in history tricked people out of billions of dollars. The best part is that unlike school, Wondrium makes learning fun. Instead of listening to boring lectures, you can watch entertaining documentaries and choose how you want to learn new things. You can stream Wondrium on your TV, phone, or computer and learn while you're commuting, cooking, or chilling on the couch. Or you can sign up for a free trial at Wondrium.com Invicta and use the promo code INVICTA for 26% off the annual plan. Thanks again to Wondrium for sponsoring this video.